Hello, and welcome to the Light of Navigation. This is where God's love, hope, and goodness is found in any of life's storms. My name is Marguerite Woodall, and it's my pleasure to welcome you. If someone you know will be lifted up or encouraged by this video, please share it. I also appreciate it when you click the like and subscribe buttons as well. This helps to further the message that I carry for others. I'd like to share with you a personal short story regarding an enemy many of us have to face. It's a true story. It's about what many of us dread or fear and how God can walk us through it all. There was one night as I stood in the doorway of my home that my doctor called me. I'd been waiting on a biopsy report that week, and he told me it was cancer. Here I was, just leaving to go out the door to attend my first Grief Share group support meeting that same night. I can't begin to describe the lostness and the pain, and especially the fear that I was feeling and experiencing in those moments. It felt like the other shoe had finally dropped in a series of shoe drops in my life. At the same time, I'm still in the early stages of grieving over the loss of my son a year and a half earlier. How do you cope with this and all it entails emotionally, mentally, and physically at the same time? And then a demonic voice of fear began to whisper to me as well. It was bringing to my mind every imaginable scenario involving impending doom and death from the diagnosis that I had just been given. There's been a stronghold of fear in my life, and it has plagued me on many fronts for many years. Fear is multifaceted. It will present itself in many different ways. There's the fear of death, the fear of lack in our finances, the fear for a loved one's safety, the fear of the unknown, and the list goes on and on. And those fears rise at various times and try to consume us like a wildfire if it can. I shared the cancer diagnosis with one of my closest friends in a phone call. I was walking across a church parking lot that night to attend this first Grief Share meeting. In the following minutes of our phone conversation as I stood there, God stepped into my moments of pain and fear as I was voicing them. My friend began to share about an image spiritually she began seeing from the Lord as we were speaking. She described seeing a bonfire, and a spirit of fear was dancing around it, throwing lies into the flames as fuel to cause it to flare up and grow larger and spread. The Lord was showing her that it was trying to shift my focus mentally and emotionally with its lies of impending doom to try and consume me. She was being supernaturally shown the battle in my mind, that demonic spirit of fear was pitching against me. It was trying to convince me that I would die from the cancer. Then, in the middle of this conversation as well, another move of God's Spirit with His voice came through. My friend, suddenly, boldly, and with unmistakable clarity and authority, the tone of her voice in those moments was not of this earth. God spoke and said, "Whose report will you believe?" I was shocked and I wasn't sure if he was speaking about the diagnosis itself being an error, or that the cancer meant my imminent death. I asked God, "What report do you mean, Lord?" And he replied, "The report from the enemy, that this means your death, or my report that it does not." And a second time, God spoke and asked me with an even greater force and with his manifest presence engulfing me, "Whose report will you believe?" To say he was emphasizing the question is an understatement. God's manifest presence permeated the atmosphere all around me as he spoke in that parking lot. As I stood there, the fear of the Lord hit me like a ton of bricks. It terrified me. He was demanding an answer. I quickly replied out loud, "I will believe the report of the Lord." What was I going to say? No? These words were hardly past my lips when God revealed to me an interpretation or understanding about part of a vision I saw the day my son died. That was 1.5 years earlier. I wrote about the vision in my first book, and there was one portion of it that had been nagging at me, and I had wondered about it for some time. In this vision, there were 3 bonfires that had been lit on a remote island's beach. Historically, it was known that local islanders or pirates would light large bonfires to lure unsuspecting ships into their harbor when storms at sea were approaching. There were hidden reefs underwater in their harbors which tore the ships apart. The result was shipwreck and the ship's cargo floating ashore for the natives or pirates to gather as plunder. At the same time, I also saw a tall red and white striped lighthouse in the vision, and it was situated on a large solid rock outcropping of land. It was farther down along the shoreline. I knew instinctively that it was the true light of guidance for the ships that approached and could be trusted to guide them to the safest harbor. The lighthouse represented Christ. It was the number of bonfires on the first beach in this vision that was a mystery for me for some time, and I had wondered often why there was 3 of them on the island shore instead of just 1. In those moments, as I stood in the church parking lot, and immediately after God spoke, he gave me the understanding of what those 3 bonfires represented in that vision. The first bonfire represented the death of my husband in 1988. His death was meant to shipwreck a deeper commitment I had made in my life towards God at the time, and to cause me to question God's goodness. The second bonfire represented the death of my son Randall. This also was meant to shipwreck my faith and my trust in God. It was to shipwreck my faith and my trust in God with regard to my son's salvation. I had assumed that the third bonfire was representative of my death when my friend saw it as we spoke. But God's Spirit quickly corrected me. It was the fear of death that I needed to face and overcome by trusting God as I had never trusted Him before. The spirit of fear was trying to stoke those flames of the third bonfire with lies of impending physical destruction and death from the cancer. God stepped into those moments to rebut the lies that this demonic spirit was trying to prompt me to accept. I was emotionally exhausted when I went home that night. Sleep was welcome relief from a tumultuous day, to say the least, and I had a lot to think about with what had occurred in the parking lot of that grief share meeting that night. As I slept through the night, I kept hearing someone singing a song to me. I'm wondering in my sleep, whose voice is that? The mysterious voice sang it over and over again to me well into the early morning hours. The song was "Fear is a Liar." I was wondering, why was this voice emphasizing this particular song as I slept? And I realized God was trying to communicate something to me. When I got up in the morning, as soon as I could, I quickly searched the internet on my laptop for this song. There was an urgency in my spirit as I did. The songwriter I discovered was a man named Zach Williams. I'd briefly heard it before on the radio as I drove to work a couple of times. But this was not a mental recollection from listening to this song on the radio. It was a literal voice of some sort that was singing that song to me all night long. I was strongly impressed to search out the lyrics. They must be important enough, for God to sing it to me all through the night. I was only interested in the lyrics, not the trailer video, I told myself. I don't know about you, but sometimes I'll hear a song and not just really be listening to the lyrics, only the notes themselves and the beat. It was the official music video that I finally found, and it showed several life scenes that expressed the message of the song's lyrics. The successive scenes in this video depicted how a spirit of fear was trying to bring destruction into people's lives with its lies. And the message each time was that fear is a liar. As the lyrics of the song were being displayed, there was a scene of a man who was attempting suicide because of a job termination. Financial fears had gripped him. Another scene was that of a young woman's emotional agony as she faced the bullying by her peers at school and the conflict with her mother that resulted. The fear of man was plaguing her. But one final scene that stood out from all the rest, that played out before me, and my world stopped as I watched it, was that of a woman who kissed her fingertips, then lovingly touched a photograph on the wall of her home. It was the framed photo of a dead son. Then moments later, in the video's next scene, she picked up a pamphlet from her coffee table with the title, "Coping with Cancer." Short scenes followed showing the effects of the cancer treatments and its toll on her. There were the moments of crippling physical weakness from chemotherapy, and then her hair falling out onto her comb in front of her before the bathroom mirror. And in addition to it all, she was grieving for a lost son. There I was. The devastating grief over the death of a son, then a cancer diagnosis shortly after. And it was playing out in front of me in this video. I have to tell you, I broke down as I watched, and I sobbed openly at the table in front of my laptop where I sat. The song's music and its words surrounded me in those moments as I wept, and God's personal message for me was very clear. Fear is a liar, Marguerite. You know, the day before, a close friend had offered to pray for me at her prayer group's weekly meeting. And that evening, the evening before, I shared with her about God's message that He delivered when He sang a song to me in the middle of the night and the video that I had viewed that morning. Her astonishment was evident when she spoke. She said, "Marguerite, that's the song we played specifically for you as we prayed for you last night." In the midst of life's storms, we must not be distracted by the light of the enemy's bonfires of lies. Those lies will erode our faith and consume us. They can shipwreck our faith in God. Jesus Christ is our lighthouse. In the midst of our trials and suffering, God will set us free from our fears if we allow Him to do so. Through my son's death and this cancer issue, the stronghold of fear in my life is coming down, brick by brick, and I'm overcoming the fear of dying and many other fears as well. When we overcome the world's fears, we are free to live, laugh, and love. Then we become free also to share the love of God because there's no fear of losing anything anymore, and we have everything to gain. I have the promise of heaven and uninterrupted time with the living God in my future, as well as with all of my family who've gone before me. Whom or what do I have to fear? I listened to the song and the video a second time before leaving that morning. I didn't want to ever forget God's message for me. He had sung a song to me in the night, asking me to trust Him, and that He told me fear is a liar. When the video ended the second time, I reached over to shut off the music, and the next song on the random playlist had already begun. It was another Christian song, and its title was, "You're Going to Be Okay." It was by Jen Johnson. What? I'd never heard this song before. Okay, I thought as I started laughing. That just had to be coincidence, right? 5 minutes later, I jumped in my car, headed for work that day. As I turned the ignition on, the radio began to play, and the first song that played, you guessed it, "Fear is a Liar." And then God threw down the mic.